We're joined today by Randall Nickerson, who is the director of the documentary Ariel Phenomenon. You all are probably familiar. I hope you've listened to episodes 246 and 247, where we discuss the unbelievable but very true and well-documented account of the Ariel School UFO incident. So thanks for being with us, Randall.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Now, you're not a newbie to the world of filmmaking. You've been in the film industry since the late 1980s. You worked as kind of an actor and stage and film actor before. What kind of got you into more wanting to do directing and especially documentaries?
I think, I did a lot of stand-in work. I did a lot of acting work. And then it was actually September 11th because I was there. I was 2 blocks away from the towers. And it was really in that moment that I really, because I documented some of the craziness that happened down there. And that was when I really decided, I want to tell stories about things that are real.
Wow. Like taking that suffering and conveying it and saying, this is real and it's happening and you all need to see this, everybody that can't be there on the ground.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that was a big shift. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And today's the anniversary. Every anniversary I go through this, process of oh my God.
And how many, how things have changed since then and how some things have stayed the same. But in this case, this is your first feature-length documentary, correct? With the Ariel Phenomenon. Well, first, let's just start back at the beginning. When's the first time you heard about the Ariel School incident? What kind of piqued your interest in that?
I heard about it I actually saw the video at some kind of meeting that was held in Cambridge, and it was on a TV, on a stand, and I just was struck by their authenticity. Mm-hmm. It was the first time I'd ever seen kids interviewed about such a subject, and it really struck me quite a bit.
That's what stood out to me so much, is that not one of these children seemed like they were making it up. Every single one of them seemed steadfast and just, very believable. I have 2 children. It's easy, you can tell when a kid's kind of making something up, and all of these children seemed so credible, and it pulled at your heartstrings because you know how likely it is that a kid isn't going to be believed about something, but they were so sincere in what they had seen.
That sincerity. How did you find the clips, I guess, that would be the most impactful? Because there's a significant amount of footage in this case, right? What was your, process in trying to find this is the most compelling moment with these children to tell their stories in the best way?
Well, there was an enormous amount of archival that I found over the years that other news organizations had filmed, or journalists. So I had a good 4 or 5 hours of these kids being interviewed. But what it really boiled down to was the interviews of these children more toward the beginning of the incident, or closer
early
to the time it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the other interviews are very valuable. I wish everybody could see them because it just confirms everything else that's been filmed. But the choices around the material were based around the immediacy of the incident and soon after that incident.
Was that a conscious choice of you wanted to choose that footage because it was the best, or because it is as far as it is the closest to the incident, so perhaps people that are skeptical would believe it, or just that it was most compelling, or kind of both?
I think it was both. It was very right after the incident, immediately after, and then the footage that existed in the first couple months where these kids were being interviewed, because they were interviewed 6 months later, a year later, 3 years later, a year and a half later. I mean, the story doesn't change. It's just, relative to the immediacy of the incident. And
even 20 years later, their stories haven't changed.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
Well, you were the first person to kind of tackle this topic because it was such a big deal. Why do you think it was so long that it took someone like you to come along to make a feature documentary about this subject?
I think the Harvard professor, Dr. John Mack, that he was, after his visit to Zimbabwe, studying this incident. He was planning on making a documentary. It never got completed. A couple other people also tried to make a documentary about this this event, and it was there. Africa was a big holdup, depending on the political situation in the country and different people that owned footage and this and that. So I don't know. I just went for it. You know, I got on an airplane to Africa in a very, I wasn't supposed to be in the country because of the political violence.
Wow.
But it was one of those things I just like, you know what, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it now because I don't know what's going to happen down the road. Maybe I may not even be able to get into the country. So
did you encounter any kind of political strife or pushback while you were there? Really?
I mean, they did not want any Western journalists in the country. And, you know, I had cameras and tripods, and we had the CIO, which is basically their intelligence service, following us.
Wow.
Once we got into the airport, and then I ran into them again at the library. And that's when the New York Times reporter got arrested. He was put in jail.
Wow.
But he was staying in the, you know, Harare, which is the capital, and I was staying in a shack, literally a shack, with no hot water, no nothing, no electricity. But it was like 3 hours from the city, so I was no one was going to find me, you know.
Yeah, you're kind of away from that.
Times when I went in to speak to government people that I was definitely very concerned.
Wow.
And was that your first trip there as like a fact-finding mission initially, or is that the trip you took that was shot later? You did multiple trips out there?
That was the fact-finding mission. It was also it turned into tracking down the children now. Once I got to the school, because I had all kinds of stories that it wasn't there, that it burnt down, that you know, and then I got to the school through a South African reporter, Nikki Carter, who was wonderful. And her and I went into the country kind of, you know, undercover.
Not supposed to be there.
Under the dark of night.
Yeah, it was very, it was pretty wild. And I have to commend her because she took the same risk I did. You know, we both took a risk. And so we got to the school, and, you know, there were 3 teachers there who were at the incident itself. And, you know, from my perspective, I was like, so what happened? You know, I was open-minded and like, did this just get made up, or, you know, how did this happen? And then the teachers are saying, oh, no, it really happened.
Wow.
That was just the mind-blowing part of it, is the steadfast nature of belief in those old interviews with the teachers. And I believe it was the 3rd grade teacher that just said, no, I know my students. It's like what Christy said earlier. You know your kid, and you know whenever they're just kind of spinning a yarn versus, and she just seemed, with the kind of the incredulity of everyone around her, you saw that. Was that something that they were just wore their heart on their sleeve right when you came in? They were willing to talk about it, or was there any resistance to bringing up the past or anything?
No, they were very open about it.
I love that.
I don't think they'd had anybody there for an awfully long time to talk about it.
Did you get the sense that they were like just yearning to talk about it, and that, you know, like no one had come around for them to tell their story to, and now they were getting the opportunity to?
That's true. I found that, that the even the groundskeepers who were there really wanted to share what they observed and what they heard during that time period. The teachers, you know, some of the teachers that actually saw things themselves.
Wow.
Right.
Which isn't really in the movie at all. I wanted to keep it to just the kid's story at this point. But they shared quite a bit with about their own experiences and their own feelings about it. And that was great. And then I started to collect all the names of the students that were there, and then put up a Facebook page. This woman, Robin Jerd, volunteered to put that Facebook page so we could start getting people in contact with me. And I started to meet the kids, one by one over years. And, when I go to an interview, I'm like, I don't know what he's going to say. Is this it? Like, one interview could end the entire story if there's some big secret.
Right, if they admit it. It was me the whole time. I was in a costume. I ran around. It was me. Well, I was going to ask, the archival footage juxtaposed with the modern interviews is so powerful in that there is such consistency. But was there any interviews with the adults now that had been witnesses, that children at the time, adults now, one of their answers surprised you, or you were, it was a piece of information that hadn't been widely reported that, you kind of captured by talking with them now in the future?
Yeah, I would say, I was shocked pretty much every single interview by how honest and how it was the same story they told as children. And this is the thing that got me, because a lot of the interviews that were done with the children never saw, ever.
Right.
So
that's
when
powerful.
I went to interview them, they didn't know what I knew.
Wow.
Yet they repeated the exact same story 20-something years later.
That adds to the credibility even
It
more.
does.
Yeah, for sure.
It was footage that was in an archive that they would not have had access to. They would not have been able to watch it or memorized it. I thought, and obviously she becomes a large part of the story, Emily Trim. That was extremely compelling that she was extricated so quickly after the incident.
Yes.
What was it like making contact with Emily for the first time? Was she at all hesitant to get involved, or how did that kind of come about?
When I first met her and interviewed her, she was pretty upset. Because she was just kind of revisiting it herself for the first time. And that's when I first interviewed her. And she cried through a lot of the interview because she really never got a chance to speak about it.
Yeah.
She was likely interviewed as well as her brother at the time, but their parents, I believe, made sure those interviews didn't go anywhere.
Wow. They seem like,
and then they moved to Canada right away because of that incident.
Yeah. And she speaks in the documentary about how being just, taken away from anybody that could relate to you and commiserate with you was so detrimental to her mental health, and how her brother never really talked about it. Even as an adult, like finally her parents kind of tiptoed around it. So as a 12-year-old being just ripped from your moving away from your friends in any school is hard.
Yeah.
But when you've gone through such a traumatic, possibly event, life-changing for sure, and then you have no one that can relate to you until you come along and give her a platform, my hat's off to you for staying in a literal shack 3 hours away just to capture these kids' stories, because we are so passionate about telling people's stories that don't normally have a voice and, on a larger platform. So you have given all these kids that, and I hope that Emily and all of them have found a sense of closure that perhaps they didn't have before.
Yeah, I think I've given them a voice, and I don't know, closure for all the different individuals is going to be their own.
Yeah.
How they deal with it, But the interesting part of this too, that is not in the movie, is all the other people I interviewed who didn't want to go on camera.
Wow.
That had the same story, the same everything.
Why were they fearful of how they'd be perceived to the public?
Fearful of repercussions in their work or family. So that was interesting and telling in itself.
Yeah,
right.
I even interviewed children that were not at school that day. And then they asked them about, when you got back to school, did you hear about it? And did you believe your friends? And they all, of course, said, of course. We could tell our friends had been through something.
Yeah.
So there's a large amount of interviews that never made the movie because of people fearing repercussions or ridicule.
Well, and that is so telling because you see in a lot of, if it was a hoax, people want that fame and a chance to, get in front of a camera. And if you're like, I don't want to talk about this, that's adds even more credibility that, they're not in it for fame or limelight. They're just trying to cope with what happened to them.
That's true. And you'll see it still. I mean, we don't see any of these witnesses trying to make a career for themselves. It's not there.
Yeah, we're not seeing best-selling, but like tell-all books or.
And I'm encouraging them, like, you guys got to write your story.
Please,
And it's very hard. It's very hard to write your own story sometimes when you're dealing with the unknown.
It is. It's hard to be the one to stand up and say, yes, this is real and it happened to me when it is something so anomalous like this. Do you think the ones that agreed to participate in the film, or not do you think, but the ones that did participate in the film, were they more likely or more happy to do so because they knew they wouldn't just be alone? It's not just their story. Almost they have this corroboration through the archival footage and then now your present day research. Were they kind of heartened by that and you saw some more sign on?
I think so. I think everybody was glad that the story was being raised again because it sort of disappeared between after it was on sightings in 1995, it literally disappeared until I got there in 2007 and started filming.
Wow.
And people
disappeared to the public, but for them every day they're grappling with this. Yeah. So it just builds and builds.
Dreams. You saw Emily's art.
An amazing incident.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, I think they were feeling like, why is nobody paying attention to what happened here?
Yeah.
Well, and that's what we felt when we were researching it. We noticed this gap where you can find articles from 1994, 95, 96, when there was that kind of push to discredit John Mack and then an inability to do so. And that, everything they accused him of initially in the papers, then you would see 6 months later, 8 months later. But it was almost like it wasn't interesting anymore when it wasn't all a hoax that we could all go, ha ha. It was, this Harvard professor was tricking these students. It was like, oh no, there's no hoax here. It's just this it happened. It's a thing that happened that we can't explain. It was like the media wanted to drop it. But when you picked it back up now from start to finish from 2007 until in 2017, you all went to film in Zimbabwe. What kind of was your trajectory of this story and how were you sorting through all the information over those years?
Well, 2008 was kind of the first. I started in 2007, started to collect some video and just try to understand the story. And then 2008 was the 9-month trip to Zimbabwe and South Africa.
Wow.
Pretty much lived there and collected a lot of information. And then the next trip was to England, where a lot of the children had lived now, and then across the United States. And then I went back to Zimbabwe again for B-roll and to cover the scene, interview more people. And then 2015, I went again with Emily and the crew to follow Emily's journey.
Yeah.
And then during that whole time, we're getting emails from these kids from all over the place and, phone calls and more footage that we didn't even know existed. And we're like, oh my God, there's more interviews of these kids from back then. And so the story kind of evolved through the making of it because we didn't have all the material till the end. Mm-hmm. And once we had all the material, it's like, okay, here it is. All right, this is the story. And then how do we tell it? Like, I really had to fight quite a bit not to have special effects and to really, the special effects to me were the kids' drawings.
Yes.
Oh, yes. The drawings were incredible.
That's better than any digitally created anything like that.
Yeah. That makes it cheesy and hokey a bit. But to hear the consistent descriptions of what the beings look like by, a large swath of children and all their drawings are consistent. And Emily's, when they find hers so many years later and it's how she remembered it. I mean, those are core memories that are for a reason because it it was an impact on your life, you know? So I think all of that just adds so much to the credibility of it. How many people would you say, since you said not all the interviews are in the film, have legitimized and backed up this story that were
Oh,
experienced or maybe saw it or were there that day?
I would say hundreds,
Wow.
outside the school as well. That
Yeah.
became a focus for a while for me, was talking to the other people that lived around the area, the
Neighbors.
native population, the other farmers, what they saw. Because there were a lot of reports, not just from the kids, but a lot of people saw this object flying around, like doing crazy things. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that was a big focus. But it was, even the children, like they decided not to interview the grade 1s and 2s and kindergartens to keep them out because they were so traumatized. But they
Wow.
decided they didn't want them to draw pictures or anything. They wanted to keep them separated.
Oh,
Which I
That's
think was a
rough.
wise move. But so there was far more children than the 62 they claimed at the
okay.
time, because they left a lot of the kids out of the conversation, which I understand.
So, Randall, with the kids that were at the school that were in first grade, second grade that didn't get interviewed, have any of them either reached out or were you able to make contact with any of them?
Yeah, I was able to make contact with quite a few of them. And they never had the chance to tell their story because they were kept away from the situation by the school, which was probably a smart idea because they were very traumatized.
Yeah.
But they were very adamant and actually kind of excited to share what they saw, because a lot of those younger kids were in a different perspective, came from a different perspective, which was closer to the school in their little playground area with the swings and the seesaws. So they had a lot of them had a different perspective from a little bit further away.
Almost like
Wow.
Their
yeah.
story is
So,
very interesting.
well, and did their stories kind of, I'm assuming, dovetail and corroborate everything that the students that were interviewed at the time said?
Yes. The only thing that really struck me about those younger kids who were out on the playground before the other ones, they said that they were already there.
So that they didn't
The
arrive.
craft and aliens were already there.
They were already on the
Wow.
playground. So that was
Wow.
consistent
Interesting.
amongst those younger kids. And that, to me, is a whole entire other story in a way. It's the precursor of what actually the movie's about.
Right. And
Wow.
the same when you interviewed locals, folks living in the immediate area. And then we were both really struck by the interview with Chief Namanwa as well as Duke Muzona, who were both from different areas, but were able to provide not just a local perspective, but almost that empathy of like what you saw was real. Did you find that permeated throughout the local people that you interviewed that, maybe didn't get on BBC at the time back in the day?
Yes. People see a lot of things over there that are particularly around this incident. But it's not, people talk about, oh, it's a Western world phenomenon. And it's pretty widespread in Africa. A lot of people have seen these types of craft and even these creatures. Amazingly so, but it just emphasizes that this is really a worldwide phenomenon.
So people there had seen the same types of beings that the children reported on different days. So
Yes.
one might say these beings had been visiting that area for quite some time and were seen multiple times.
Yep, in different countries surrounding that
Mhm.
area, in that country particularly
Yeah,
too.
I was struck when Chief Namanwa, when Emily is explaining it to him, especially having been taken so quickly away from the area around the incident where she could relate, that look of just relief when she is able to speak with him. And he says, a person of authority who has a lot of wisdom, and he can say to her, we've got those too. Yeah, we experienced that. How powerful was it for you to see Emily being validated as she was, and kind of her reaction to that afterwards?
Yeah, just it was very powerful. And it kept happening with Shamba, the chief.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was doing an interview with Shamba. It was very, I think, healing for Emily.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I mean, he started to talk about his own encounter with these things, and I'm filming Emily and him talking. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta sit this guy down. I know he's seen them. He's describing them in how they move and how they never are alone. They always have partners. That's how he said it. And
Interesting.
He said a lot of things. I'm like, he's seen them. There was just no question.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the indigenous culture was, and they also have different names for these things, over hundreds and thousands of years. Mainly the Tukalosh, and there's other names for it. But it's basically the same thing. Basically the same creature.
And we love that
about for a long time.
Well, the cultural competency with which you handled this, not coming in either from a skeptic or a definitive, it is aliens from outer space, being like, an unexplained phenomenon here happened. What could it be? And I think taking it to those, those natural conclusions of speaking with an indigenous culture. And what was kind of the reaction that you've gotten from the audience? Because I do think, because you've couched it in such an empathetic way of, these are these people's stories. And then also, this is the local culture. This is something that has been, at least in some areas, sort of taken as a thing that happens. Like, yeah, that happens to everyone. What was some audience reactions or even critical reactions that may otherwise have said, it's just another UFO movie? Whereas because of the skillful way with which you framed it, did you receive perhaps positive reaction from some people that would otherwise have been kind of skeptical and poo-pooing it?
I've received a lot of positive reaction, and I think that's the reason why is I didn't, follow the UFO genre, of, a host and somebody telling you what this is, the special effects, all the kind of hokiness.
Yeah,
I wanted
cheesy.
to really tell a film about real people that something really happened to, and sort of stay on the inside of it, rather than, what do they feel? Like everybody in the film is first person. They were either there or they were there interviewing or they were there investigating. Everyone's first person. There's no second person stories, no second hand, third hand. So that was kind of the goal, and people seem to like that. That it's being treated like any other documentary would be treated about any other subject. Like, let's talk to the people and follow their story and hear how they feel.
And treat them with the respect they deserve. Yeah. I watch a ton of documentaries. That's kind of my thing. And I told Heather after watching yours that, this is in my top 5 of all time, because I've never seen a documentary with so much archival footage that immediately happened after the event. And that completely changes it from someone, if it was just the adult interviews speaking of something that happened. But when you can see these children in the landscape and the environment that this took place in, it becomes a totally different experience. And one, in my opinion, that you just can't argue with. It's I think it's the most compelling documentary that we have of proof of life on other planets and beings, because these children just are so believable and credible, and they're too innocent, I think, to concoct such a story and be able to keep it up for so long.
Right.
Yeah. And the consequences for lying in that school or making something up. And it was a very harsh Christian school.
Mm-hmm.
There were severe consequences for that, and sorry. throughout the whole thing, I never found any other explanations or anything rational. And you got to remember, all these kids were from different races, from different religions, different cultures that were
different home
some of them
countries.
were missionary kids from England. Some were they were from all over the place. So that makes it even more complicated because if they're going to come together about some story, they've all got different belief systems.
True.
And, they weren't, maybe a few were exposed to media. They'd get it on VHS tapes from Canada or somewhere, but most all of them didn't have that, a relation to media other than Zimbabwe television, which was
they're not watching X-Files or anything like that to get any of these types of ideas. Yeah.
No, that's compelling because I think some of the images look, kind of what in South Park they have the visitors and it's like looks exactly like the gray head with the eyes. Well, all of the now kind of media cartoonish, and we've always had like the little gray men, from a couple decades back. But I thought that was extremely compelling that the kids' drawings were what people would write off as, oh, they just saw that on a cartoon. It's like there was not a cartoon that looked exactly like this. And even if there were, where they live, they weren't, having a Pop-Tart in the morning and watching that specific imagery of it. They lived in a totally different place, which again, like you said, it's like all the stars aligned for this incident to have immediacy of archival footage, kids that aren't otherwise exposed to this, alien kind of trope in media, and then having the ability years later for you, and then having John Mack come there. So and speaking of John Mack, kind of what legacy do you hope to preserve of his, or does that even come in your mind? Do you feel like you're kind of taking the baton since he had intended on making a documentary and kind of, taking that across the finish line? How do you kind of feel about his role in all of this?
I just feel like he, as a human being, took extraordinary risk
so
to
much
his career, to his personal life, to give his real professional and experienced opinion to stand up and say this is something different. It's not a pathology that we understand. Like, this is behaving like something is real. So is it? And that's really the question he raised. So he took great risk to do that, and I'll always, commend him for that. One of the things I like to do in my life is when somebody that you know or care about passes away, you finish one of their projects.
Oh,
that's
I love that.
Before.
That is beautiful.
I finished my grandfather's piano, and to finish John Mack's film.
That's
my
incredible.
gift to him.
It really is. It's such a gift. And when researching the episodes, I found myself because when we research, Christy often will watch documentaries and a lot of footage and stuff. And I love old newspapers. I love to go through old newspapers. And what I was struck in looking at these old newspapers was just how eager everyone was back then to destroy John Mack. Like they just wanted to annihilate him. And throughout it all, he maintained such scientific standards with really adhering to what you would expect to see in this type of interviews. And then subsequent to that, I found it so frustrating. And again, at the end of it, whenever he's, facing censure, and then Harvard goes, well, yeah, I mean, he didn't really do anything wrong. Yeah, whatever. Well, that doesn't get the headlines as much as Harvard professor with sex aliens, crazy story. And then when it's like, well, Harvard said he was doing nothing wrong, they don't really publish that. So have you felt a sense of satisfaction being able to show the real John Mack, which was not this wacky talking head on Phil Donahue or writing this, the salacious book? It's more like he was an academic who had a heart and a compassion. Have you been able to kind of see the turn in attitude towards him, or like his legacy in a different light?
I think it's turning. I think his contribution for sure will be recognized down the road. But what Harvard actually did, and they were very successful at doing, was destroying his reputation amongst his peers.
Yeah.
And
putting him in that office. Yeah. Separate.
That's what they really did. And I think that's horrible. I understand that they were very freaked out about one of their professors, a Pulitzer Prize winning professor at that, speaking out about something they were very nervous about. So,
But the fact that
yeah.
he did that and took those risks to give these children a voice and be heard that's, the utmost admiration for someone that's willing to put all of their own personal things on the line to help others.
Yeah.
It makes me think of one of our listeners, I think, told us about Dr. Semmelweis, that first doctor who was like, maybe we should wash our hands after touching the corpses to help them. And they're like, he's crazy. He's telling everybody there's secret little bugs on your hands that make you sick. And now if a doctor said, hey, I've just touched a corpse, I'm going to deliver your baby without washing my hands, you'd call the police. And so I think we're going to see as time progresses, the more and more we learn and as a society and grow, we're going to go, oh, damn, John Mack was right. Randall Nickerson was right. Like years later, what do you kind of hope that people gain by watching this film?
I hope they understand the stigma that has been there. I hope they kind of, if they happen to run into one of these things, that they have some guideposts of what might happen, right? And what the emotions you might go through are. I think that's important. I
told Heather that I had never considered how isolating it could be to have an encounter with a being like this until this documentary, where you really do see like how it impacted these children at the time. But then 20 years later, they're still feeling those feelings. That being able to show that is what I think, just really sold it for me.
Yeah. That legacy of, or the impact of, oh, I'm so afraid of being ridiculed or made fun of. I won't even tell my fiance, or I won't even tell my husband that this happened.
Or my family. I'm not allowed to talk about it with my parents. Taking that stigma away. So where, with everything, if the more we can talk about it, I think the healthier it is, especially when it's something like this.
What have you thought about all this influx of news about possible UFOs or the government confirming? Or is it bittersweet because it's exciting at once, but on the other hand, you're like, well, in 1994, everyone kind of dogpiled on these kids and this professor, this psychologist, and now all of a sudden there's government hearings about it. How's that been to watch play out?
I think it was great. I was actually at the hearings.
Oh, wow.
Tell me everything.
That's incredible.
I was there the night before at 9:00 at night.
Wow.
And waited because I wanted to be there just as to support these guys that were taking the risk to bring out some truth. And I think, the more the better is how I feel. I feel like this is an enormous thing for humanity. And I know it's going to take time. I want to do whatever I can to help the situation in any way possible, because there's more important for me. It's like there's nothing more important. Right. Happening. So I'm pretty, happy and excited that we may make some progress. And then there's a lot of things that are going to blow our minds. And finding out we're not just the only ones out here can actually help us also. I mean, we may be in a position to learn an enormous amount and evolve in ways we never thought of because of maybe potentially being in contact with these creatures.
Right, like a different perspective.
I don't think we're going to see them until they realize, like, okay, Earth has got it. That they know we're here.
Yeah.
They're not going to bother.
Well, we joked about it on the show because we're like, yeah, if you were an extraterrestrial and you came to Earth and go, oh my God, they eat animals, they just eat them. Oh, and they shoot, they annihilate. I mean,
with guns, I'd turn around and leave
children
too.
with guns. They blow up their nuclear weapons. They have these arsenals pointed at each other. And then you might go, oh, what are they going to do? They think each other are outsiders. We're real outsiders. Like we better shut up until they. So that's why I tell everybody, can we just achieve world peace so that the aliens will actually make themselves visible? Because until then, I think they're only going to choose like children, like a vessel that's willing to listen with an open mind and an open heart.
No judgment.
I think you're right. And I think, a lot of these visitations around our military and nuclear bases and things are being said to us, it seems, in many ways that I don't know how long it's going to take us to get these things, but
Get the message.
I would imagine that once we, really understand the gravity of the situation and the potential gains that we could make as a species, I think
then
Then
that's when
maybe,
we're
that's the next level of evolution.
We're at this pinnacle of like major climate disasters.
Yes.
I mean,
and we're going to save ourselves.
Here.
Yeah, they're showing
there's
up.
Probably not a lot of Earth-like planets.
There are
There's,
not.
There's. I know there's probably billions of them, but each one is unique.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if this species is aware of all those, they sure probably don't want to lose them because they're biological gems. So that's my take on it. But
I was just about to ask. So, in your opinion, do you think beings like this are coming here and visiting to help us avoid, just collapsing in on ourselves, or to kind of get a lay of the land because they know our time's about up and they're like, well, where do I want to live once they've destroyed themselves? Like coming in and getting some just scoping it out. Or is it, more sinister, or is it just curiosity? What do you think the reason for these visits are?
I don't think it's sinister. I think, considering that they're able to do some of the things they can do technologically and with space time, I would imagine they went through what we're similar to something we are going through a long, long time ago.
That's what we both believe too.
They're here, likely for resource, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're here to take over the planet. That's not.
Yeah.
Something I've ever really thought about, because it's just, I don't think that's the reason. And I really do feel like deeply that they're trying to evolve us, help us get to the next level. Because we're just entering space, we're just beginning to leave our solar system with a few probes, and it's a critical time, I would think, for any other species out there to really keep an eye on us before we get out of hand.
Right, that's a good point too. And before we hurt ourselves, honestly, because they do seem more benevolent, because they could have just snatched up all those kids. They could have destroyed. They could have just, whatever. Whereas it kills me when you hear, well, we can't make contact. You don't know what they're going to do to us. Like, if they can fly here or appear here,
annihilated us if they wanted.
Yeah, they could. For sure. We could have been zapped. So I agree. It seems more of a benevolent person or curiosity or something like that.
Or like you said, resources. Maybe there's something here that to us is nothing, but in wherever their planet is, like, twigs aren't a thing.
Like,
and they
we need those twigs.
So they're just laying in forests, collecting as much wood as they can get. Yeah.
No, for real. I think that it's just so many possibilities. Well, who do you think, if your choice, the visitors come to the planet and they say, we just want to talk to one person, who are we having them talk to? One person that's going to not mess it up. It's going to talk to them reasonably, rationally, and work it all out for everybody. I have mine. Everybody choose yours.
Wow. I never thought of that. I just,
I can be wrong, but my vote is Hank Green. Like, I feel like Hank Green is such a good scientist that he could vet the science part, but he's also such a great communicator that he could communicate whatever message from us to us. So personally, I'm just starting this campaign that when the time comes, not the president of any country, Hank Green is my vote.
Okay. I want to nominate Randall, because I feel like you've done so much research.
Yeah. Why am I? Why
you can easily speak to them, and they'd probably like to see, we all like to see old videos of ourselves.
I want to switch my vote because also then they would say, we just want to see who made this movie because this actually got it right. Whoever's
Right.
made this documentary is who got it right. Take us to your director. It might be like, take us to your leader. Take me to your director.
Leader
Because
is ubiquitous.
Exactly. It's the leader on set. But truly, because it was handled with such great communication of getting that message across to audiences in a way that wasn't, this was an alien and I'm going to tell you why, but let's just listen and be empathetic and see what we learn when we open our minds and take in available information. That's the information's been there. All you have to do is take it in. So Christy's right. I take back my answer. Christy called it.
It was less even about the aliens and more about the impact it had on the people that witnessed it. And those are the stories that connect with me more because I want to know, the person behind this happened to, and this film did that beautifully.
Context.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way it's been happening and probably the way it'll continue to happen is people become more aware and they get into a position where they're more open-minded and then they see something. That's usually what happens. And it's almost like these creatures know when you're ready.
Oh, I love that.
Interesting. So we must make
I've
ourselves.
seen it enough to create a hypothesis around that.
What's the hypothesis?
But I think these things know exactly where we're at, and they're waiting for us to grow. And part of that growth is letting people know that they are actually there. But
would you say that there's multiple species that have visited, or is it all kind of from the same the same planet, for lack of a better word?
I think there's one particular species. I've heard of others. I've just never run across it in all my investigations. And 90% of the reports are all pretty much the same.
The same look and everything that the children said.
Yes, and people don't realize that that image didn't come. That body configuration did not come from science fiction. That came from real reports way back in the 40s and different. That image is stuck around.
The gray head, the big gray head, and the small body.
It's fascinating. When I was in Marfa, I found this book at a store, just like this weird little bookstore that had all of these clippings that it's almost like an archival, just across the years. And it's done in an artsy way, but looking at it, you're right. I noticed this repeated trope of a description that was then taken by Hollywood or novels or whatever. And I think now, I'm born in 1986. So for me, looking back, I'm like, oh, well, it's all aliens have always looked like that in movies. Therefore, if someone says they've seen an alien from movies, but what happens when you actually look into the information, and through this show, we've had the opportunity to do that and say, what you said is right. Oh, no, this is Hollywood stole it from people's real experiences. And then then later when people have real experiences, they're just sort of gaslit and told, well, you got that from Hollywood. And you're like, no,
you're like, no, the chicken came before the egg. I was there before Hollywood. Well, and also because I think we all think that they are a highly evolved past version of us, that when you look at evolution and, that is, from an evolutionary biological standpoint, that is how humans will evolve is to look like. So it makes sense from both like a scientific and spiritual standpoint, in my opinion, of I think we can marry those two things because I think there's evidence on both sides. Yeah. Strong evidence from science too, that this is. And who are we to think that we're the only people in this universe? How arrogant that our planet would be the only planet with life.
I think science is going to pull this through more than anyone. I mean, I'm glad that there are many people speaking out, and I'm going to continue to speak out. And
us too. Well, whatever we can do to the extent anyone's listening.
But we're just going to have to figure out what all this is about, really, because I don't have all the answers by any stretch.
Certainly.
Just the fact that something major is going on. And I really, what drives me is that we might want to pay attention to it. It may be very urgent, and to find out exactly what this species agenda is, you know,
Well,
because
ignoring it may be at our
minds
peril.
change, you know.
True.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think everyone likes to assume the worst, but if you flip that and say, what if they're trying to help us? Because they've been there and they've already lived through it. And they're like, if you just cut this one thing out, it's going to make a world of difference for you. And because we fear what we don't know, we don't listen.
Right. Not take the good advice just because of who it's coming from.
Heather and I have a theory that, if I may, I want to run past you to see what you think.
I believe this, by the way.
We both believe this, and honestly, your film, the children's description, we were like, see, we really think that there's some kind of portal or space time or a wormhole or something like within the ocean somewhere. And perhaps there are aliens even down there, or they can travel from the ocean through space, because that would explain like the glimmery, watery look, the wetsuit look, the paleness of being, large. In such large eyes. It's, like fish that live deep at the Mariana Trench or something. Do you think that it's not just up above, but as above, so below?
Likely. When we go to war in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever we go, we create a forward operating base, right? We move a base and build a base right near the place that we're interested in.
True.
I would expect that these things probably came from very far away, but created some kind of base of operations close to us for their reasons, and
that makes sense.
Mainly scientific.
Really does.
So I've interviewed people that have witnessed these things in Africa come out of the ocean, go into the ocean.
There you go.
So I don't doubt that at all. It's a huge place. A lot of these, the places they come out and into the ocean are very deep. It's, and they'll come up when it starts to get shallow, which I find fascinating. It's like, oh, they have to come up.
Wow.
Like they have to
because they don't have enough room below them, and they have to come up, and then they go to another deeper spot. I don't know what's going on, but there's a connection to Antarctica. I've just done so many interviews of people that have witnessed this stuff in Africa it really raises your you can't just rule this out when you hear it from so many different people.
Or we covered the unidentified Ariel Phenomenon that came out with like the, Admiral Nimitz and all that, where the Tic Tacs coming up and out, and it looked like they were coming up out of the water. And so I think, is it that they went down there to hide, or do they go down there to park or refuel or, whatever, go
That's
back
where
to
they
base?
Live. Yeah.
Yeah. They're at least, on temporary assignment, something, whatever.
It does make sense. No, and I never really thought about setting up a base, but that makes sense too, is that perhaps it's not just like they come here and then they go, they're here and then they occasionally go back to where they're from and take the resources back or whatever. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the basic operation is like, you set up your base of operations close to the target, and then you occasionally get resupplied from your main country or planet. That makes a lot of sense. And, under the ocean, I mean, if they're going to go to the extremes of places we can't go, and that is the ocean at these extreme depths that we can't even get to.
No.
Except a few rovers, and then extreme cold in ice and stuff like that. It makes really good sense. Like, no human being's going to be knocking on our door.
True.
That's a good point. If you look at the planet and you notice the wide expanse of the Pacific Ocean where there just isn't land for a long time, and how deep it can go out there, and just how little we've all we've explored. But man, as we get down deeper into the depths of exploring the ocean, it would make sense that whatever pressure resistant machine you would have to survive space would also be able to survive those pressures down there in the ocean. But it makes sense. I'm glad to hear that when we put forth our theory to you, that you weren't like, oh no. You're like, well, it makes sense because so did us. It did with us, especially with the shiny, shimmery. When we started putting it all together, it sounds like there's something going on down there in the ocean. So we got to
Only
look at
5% of the ocean has even been explored. So imagine how much is what else. I mean, there's a ton out there that we don't know. I would think it's ignorant to think that there's not stuff out there like this.
Well, this is going to sound country, but it's like owning a lot of land, and you don't go back and look at the old corner until you get back there and go, someone's built a shack back here.
Right.
Like we just hadn't been back there, and we're like, we can look down in the Pacific.
How long has that been here? Yeah.
It's like adverse possession. Like, you got to get them out of here. But I don't know what we want to get them out of there. We might just want to figure out how we can make contact with them or something.
I like the idea of when you're ready to experience it, you will. And I just want to say for any of them that are listening, I'm ready. And I would like you to tell me what I need to know. What can I do to change us from all collapsing on ourselves?
Right. Pass the message on. We'll help as much as we can. We're in whatever we can do. Well, you've done a lot of work with this Ariel Phenomenon movie. What's the next thing on your agenda? Do you have another project you're excited about, or is it related to this or in a different field?
Well, I do have the director's cut of Ariel, which is like 3 hours long, but
I'll watch it.
I'm there.
Really good. So I'm thinking of putting that out at some point, and then I've got 2 other stories that on the same subject matter that I've been working on.
We're excited.
Can't wait.
And then I'm wondering, well, if this, if all of a sudden the public really becomes aware, then that changes a lot, and what is needed at that point,
I love that. It's a great way to think about it. What's needed? What kind of story do they need to hear to kind of help bring everybody a little bit more understanding, which is what I feel like the film does so well.
Yeah, understanding and reasons not to panic.
Yeah, don't panic and don't disbelieve or shame or ridicule somebody who wants to come to you with like a thing that happened to them that felt very real and is real to them. You know, who are we to tell somebody that they don't know what they're talking about?
Listening is a lost art, It's like I've learned over time, like, friend comes to me and they have something going on. I don't need to say anything. I just need to hear them out. And they feel better because I do, that I'm hearing them, taking them in. And I don't know, we should probably all do a little better at that.
I agree. I think that's why these children felt so comfortable speaking with you too. You have a very easygoing demeanor where, I mean, I could spill my life secrets to you right now and I feel like you'd keep them. So
let's do it.
Definitely, right? Same.
I want to hear them.
That's honestly
Juicy documentary.
boring. I talk about anything embarrassing that's ever happened to me has already been said on this show. So, but I forgot what I was
we were talking about listening. No, but you're totally right.
No. Oh, but yeah, listening and giving someone just a space to talk about it, because all anybody wants is to be heard and believed. And the more that we can do that, then the more people will come forward. And then science can't ignore it anymore when you've got so many people speaking up about it.
There's power in numbers.
Yeah.
And it covers all issues, really.
That
whole concept of hearing people out.
And listening and telling stories. And we love to be a platform and a conduit for stories, whether it's like the students from the Ariel School or for you with your filmmaking, or we do Freaky Friday where people write their stories in. So if we can be a conduit for that story, we're very happy to. And we wanted to tell our listeners where they can watch Ariel Phenomenon, not only on streaming services, but given that it is the 29th anniversary on September 19th, which is just in a few days, you got some special screenings coming up, a couple in Cambridge honoring Harvard's Dr. John Mack at the Brattle Theater on the September 14th and September 16th. And you'll be there doing a Q&A. What kind of got you hooked up with the Cambridge? Was it just important to kind of bring the film back for Dr. Mack?
Yeah, I felt that way. I felt like his journey, I wanted to reconnect with his original journey at Harvard. And I felt it's really important. So, we're doing Thursday, the night of the 14th, and then Saturday in the afternoon. Saturday actually is the 29th anniversary of the incident itself.
Oh, yeah.
on the
So
16th.
the
And
16th, my bad. Yeah, sorry.
then we move on to Chicago,
Yep.
and
Chicago.
then Miami, and then Las Vegas.
Yeah. So we'll put
And you
all
can still
the
get it on Amazon. And
Mm-hmm.
at this point, until we get grabbed up by a theatrical contract, I think you can get it on iTunes and Amazon as well.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And I think that even if you watch it on iTunes and Amazon, I think going to see it at one of these screenings is going to be powerful to experience it with others and also have that Q&A experience as well. But yeah, if you're not in any one of these cities, don't wait. There's no need to wait. Go right now and watch it on Amazon or Apple because it is such a powerful and impactful movie. But we'll put all the links and stuff in our show notes. So
that's great. Yeah. I think and because it was made for the big screen, that the impact of watching it on the big screen is far more intense than seeing it on a home theater or something. It's just it was designed, audio and all the clips and footage was designed and made for the.
Oh, we love
it. Do you
know
if
if
you
come
any
to
of
Dallas,
the survivors are going to be there? Any of the children that are have spoken out, are they going to be at any of them?
I'm not sure. I haven't spoken to a few. They're on the West Coast, so I doubt they'll be there, but possibly in Chicago and possibly in Boston. I just haven't.
Nice. Well, I hope so. I love
that it's been a way for them to reconnect, especially in the documentary when the two girls got to come back together after so long. And what a thing to go through with someone and then never be able to talk to them about it for 2 decades later.
Right.
Yeah.
It'd be good to reunite them and bring them back together. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yes,
for those everybody listening, you can learn more about Ariel Phenomenon at arielphenomenon.com, which will be linked in our show notes and episode description, as well as all the screenings coming up for the event's 29th anniversary in Cambridge, Chicago, Las Vegas, and Miami. We'll put all those in the episode description so you can check them out. But thank you so much, Randall, for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Heather, Christy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah. Have a good afternoon.